Great Legion was known across the stars, a force of warriors who never lost a war, a name that brought both fear and respect to every world. They were not just soldiers. They were legends written into the history of many planets. For years, the Legion fought in battles that shook entire galaxies. Yet even in their strength, they always moved with order, always followed rules, and never acted without reason. But now, something strange was happening. The Legion had gathered in silence, not for war, not for conquest, but for a choice that none of their enemies could have imagined, a choice that confused even their own soldiers. Whispers moved like shadows through the camps, through the halls of steel ships and icy planets where the Legion walked. The whispers carried one question: who will they choose? The soldiers stood in rows, their armor shining under the pale light of distant suns. Their eyes were hidden behind helmets, but inside their hearts there was curiosity. Some felt excitement, some felt fear, some thought the Legion would raise another mighty general, someone strong with a voice of thunder. Others thought a hero of the old wars would rise again. But then, in the middle of these rumors, a new name began to echo, a name that felt too soft, too human, too ordinary. It was the name of a young woman, not a warrior, not a commander, not a hero from history. Her name was spoken with confusion. Some soldiers laughed, some argued, some fell silent. The question grew louder than ever. Why would the Legion choose her? Far away, on a small and quiet world, she lived an ordinary life. She had no idea that her name had traveled into the heart of the Legion. She did not know that armored soldiers whispered about her in distant places. She only knew the life of normal days, rising with the sun, walking through the simple paths of her home. Her eyes carry a light that others sometimes noticed, a fire that made her different, though she never realized it herself. The Legion, however, moved with purpose. They did not gather for nothing. They were never creatures of chance. If they whispered her name, there had to be a reason. And yet no one, not even their oldest leaders, spoke the reason aloud. That silence created more tension than a battlefield. Among the soldiers, the question became a storm. Why her? Why not one of us? Why not a champion of iron and blood? But the higher commanders only gave one order: wait. And so the Legion waited, silent, still, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Outside, in the cold emptiness of space, their warships floated like giants made of steel. Their engines glowed faintly, waiting for the next command. Yet no command came, only the question remained. The silence itself became heavy, like a cloak draped over every heart. The story had not yet begun, but already the mystery had taken root. The choice of the Legion was not a normal choice, not one that could be explained by strength or power. It was a choice wrapped in destiny, a choice that would one day change everything. And though the girl lived in peace, though she walked in innocence, the eyes of the Legion were already turned toward her. Their loyalty was strong, but now their loyalty needed a new name, and soon, the galaxy would learn that destiny does not always choose the strongest sword. Sometimes, it chooses the purest heart. She woke with the sound of morning birds, the same sound she had heard all her life. Her world was calm, untouched by war. The rising sun painted the sky in soft gold and pink, and she thought this was all life had to offer. Simple days filled with small tasks and quiet moments. She never imagined her name was already being whispered by warriors who ruled the stars. Her home was a village near the edge of wide green fields. People there lived simple lives, planting, harvesting, trading with neighbors. She was known among them not for power or wealth, but for kindness. She would help an elder carry water. She would comfort children when they cried. She laughed easily, and though her life seemed ordinary, her spirit carried something that made others feel safe around her. Yet she often wondered why she felt restless. Sometimes she stared at the night sky, watching the stars glow like a million eyes above her. Something inside her whispered that the stars were calling. She did not know why. She only knew that her heart beat faster when she imagined what lay beyond her small world. Her father once told her, "You have the eyes of someone who is meant to travel far." She laughed at him, shaking her head. "I will never leave this place," she said. But inside, she was not certain. Strange dreams began to come to her at night. She would see tall figures in shining armor standing in silence. Their helmets hid their faces, but their voices called her name. The dreams were so real that she woke with her heart racing. Sometimes, she could still hear the echo in the air. Her friends thought she was just imagining, but she knew something was changing. One evening, as she walked by the river, she noticed a mark carved into a stone near the water. It was a symbol she had never seen before, glowing faintly as though it was alive. When she touched it, the light flared and vanished. "Look, this sauce." Leaving her shocked, she told no one, not even her closest friend. The moment felt like a secret between her and the universe. Days passed, but small signs continued. A stranger arrived at the village market, dressed in dark robes. His eyes seemed to study her from a distance. When she tried to approach, he vanished into the crowd. Another time, she found a small piece of strange metal near her doorstep, heavier than any metal she had seen before. These were not accidents, though she did not yet understand. Her life, once so predictable, now felt full of mystery. Every ordinary moment seemed touched by something greater. She felt as if invisible threads were pulling her toward a path she could not yet see. Still, she tried to hold on to her simple days. She carried water, she gathered wood, she smiled at her neighbors, but deep inside, she knew her peace was only temporary. The whispers in her dreams grew louder, and the stars seemed to shine more brightly each night. One night, unable to sleep, she walked into the fields and looked up at the sky. The air was cool, the earth soft beneath her feet. She whispered to herself, "Why me? Why do I feel this way?" There was no answer, only the endless spread of stars above. Yet in that silence, she felt both fear and hope. She did not know that far above her, in the dark space beyond sight, massive ships of the Legion floated in stillness, waiting. Their commanders already spoke her name. Their soldiers questioned, doubted, even feared it. But destiny was already moving, and soon her life of peace would be shattered. The ordinary girl was about to learn she was never ordinary at all. The night was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She sat by her window, looking at the stars, and once again she felt that strange pull inside her chest. For weeks she had tried to ignore the dreams, the glowing symbols, the strangers who watched her. But this night would not be like the others. This night, the Legion would arrive. It began with a low hum, a sound that did not belong to her world. The animals stirred uneasily, dogs barked, and the air trembled as though the sky was being torn apart. She ran outside with the rest of the villagers, eyes wide as the stars seemed to move. A great shadow fell across the fields, larger than any mountain. A ship, dark and endless, blocked the sky. Its edges glowed faintly, and its engines roared like thunder. People screamed. Some fell to their knees in fear. Others prayed. Children clung to their mothers. But she stood frozen, unable to move. Her heart pounded, but deep inside she felt a strange calm. The ship was terrifying, yet it also felt familiar, as though she had seen it before, perhaps in her dreams. The ship landed beyond the hills, the ground shaking with its weight. The villagers whispered in terror, "The Legion! It's the Legion!" Old stories of the Legion's cruelty spread through the crowd. Some said they conquered worlds without mercy. Others claimed they were protectors bound by strict codes. But no one expected the Legion to come here, to a small, forgotten village on a quiet world. The air grew colder as armored figures marched into view. Their steps were heavy, each one echoing like a drumbeat. They were tall, faceless in their black helmets, cloaked in shadows and steel. The villagers stepped back, fear written in their eyes. Yet the soldiers did not look at them. Their gaze was fixed on her. She felt it instantly, the moment their leader raised his hand. Thong! The soldiers parted, forming a path. The commander's voice was deep, metallic, filled with authority. "We have found her," he said, and the crowd gasped. Her knees felt weak, her throat dry. She wanted to speak, to protest, but no words came. The commander stepped closer, his armor glinting under the pale moonlight. He studied her for a long moment, as though confirming something unseen. Then he said the words that would change her life forever. "You are chosen." The villagers shouted in confusion. Some demanded answers. Others begged the Legion to leave her alone. But the soldiers ignored them. Their leader spoke only to her. "You must come with us. Your place is not here. Your destiny lies beyond the stars." She shook her head, stepping back. "I am nobody. You must be mistaken." But even as she said the words, she knew they were not true. Deep in her heart, she had always known she was different. The dreams, the signs, the feeling that her life was not meant to stay small. All of it pointed to this moment. The commander tilted his head. "You will understand in time, but refusal is not your choice. The Legion does not choose without reason." His words carried both finality and mystery. Her father tried to step forward, his voice shaking. "She is just a girl. Leave her be." But two soldiers blocked his path with silent precision. Her mother cried out, reaching for her, but another soldier held her back. The villagers could do nothing against the iron wall of the Legion. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at her parents, her friends, her home. She wanted to run, to fight, to deny everything, but something inside her whispered, "This is the path. This is destiny." The soldiers surrounded her, and the commander gestured toward the ship. "Come, the Legion has waited long enough." With trembling steps, she walked forward. Every step felt like leaving behind the life soon. He knew. Every step carried her closer to a fate she could not yet imagine. As the ramp of the great ship closed behind her, the village disappeared from view. Her world grew smaller until it was gone, replaced by the cold metal halls of the Legion. The last thing she heard before silence swallowed her was the voice of the commander, soft but certain. The Legion does not make mistakes. And though fear burned in her chest, a part of her knew the truth. Her life was no longer her own. She had been chosen, and the galaxy was about to learn why. The ship carried her through endless space, and for the first time she saw the stars not as distant lights but as burning suns. Each one felt alive, powerful, close enough to touch. Yet she could not enjoy the beauty. Her heart was heavy. She had been taken from her home, and now she was trapped inside the cold halls of the Legion. The corridors were long and dark, filled with the sound of metal boots striking the floor. Soldiers marched with precision, their faces hidden by helmets. They looked at her but never spoke. Their silence was more frightening than any words. She felt small among them, like a single spark lost in a storm of steel. The commander led her to a vast chamber where others stood waiting. Not all were human. Some were tall with blue skin. Others had strange eyes that glowed like fire. They were recruits, chosen from many worlds, each of them strong, each of them already trained for battle. When she stepped inside, whispers broke out. Some stared in disbelief. Others laughed openly. "That is the one," one soldier muttered. "She is no warrior," another said. Their words stung, but she remained quiet. She could feel their doubt pressing against her like a weight. The commander raised his hand, and silence fell. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The Legion chooses not by strength alone, but by loyalty. Today begins your trials. Only those who prove themselves worthy will stand among us. Only those who endure will become Legion." The trials began with combat. He was given a weapon she barely knew how to hold. Her opponent was taller, stronger, confident. The others laughed as the fight began. She stumbled, fell, but each time she rose again. Her strikes were clumsy, yet her eyes never gave up. By the end, though bruised and exhausted, she was still standing. Her opponent sneered, but he could not defeat her spirit. The next trial tested courage. The recruits were led into a dark maze filled with illusions of fear. Some saw monsters, others relived memories of failure. She walked trembling, her hands shaking, but she kept moving. When shadows whispered that she was weak, she whispered back, "I am still here." One step at a time, she pushed forward, refusing to turn back. The final trial was the hardest. They were asked to betray a companion for safety. A soldier at her side offered her a way out if she left another behind. She shook her head. "No," she said firmly, "I will not abandon them." Even when the path grew dangerous, she carried the injured recruit on her shoulder, refusing to let go. The commanders watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. When the trials ended, many recruits were praised for skill, others for strength. But when her name was called, the chamber fell silent. No one expected it, not even her. The commander spoke clearly. "You showed no great power, no weapon skill, but you showed loyalty when it mattered. You carried others when you could have walked alone. That is the heart of the Legion." The recruits looked at her with new eyes. Some still doubted, but others began to see what the commander saw. She was not chosen for what she was, but for what she could become. That night, as she sat alone in her small quarters, she thought of her home, her family, and the life she had lost. Tears touched her eyes. Yet beneath the sadness, a spark of pride began to grow. For the first time, she felt the truth. She had faced the Legion's tests and had not broken. And though the road ahead was still dark and full of danger, she whispered to herself, "I will not fail." For deep inside, she knew destiny had only just begun. The days turned into weeks as she trained among the Legion. Each morning began with the sound of horns echoing through the steel halls, and every hour was filled with harsh drills, long marches, and endless lessons. She grew stronger, but still she was different from the others. The recruits could not understand why she had been chosen. They had muscles of stone, eyes of fire, and skills sharpened by years of battle. She had none of those, yet the commanders continued to watch her closely. They spoke little, but their eyes followed her every move. Sometimes she felt like she was part of some secret she did not understand. It was not her strength they were testing. It was something else, something hidden. One night, as the ship drifted through the endless dark of space, alarms suddenly blared. Red lights filled the corridors. Soldiers rushed to their stations. Weapons hummed as they powered up. She followed the others, fear twisting inside her chest. Something was wrong. The commander appeared, his voice sharp and commanding. "There is a traitor among us." The words struck like thunder. The Legion was built on loyalty above all else. Betrayal was unthinkable, yet here was proof. Systems had been sabotaged, and secret codes had been stolen. Whispers spread quickly. The recruits looked at each other with suspicion. Every face became an enemy. Every step carried doubt. The girl felt the tension as heavy as chains. She knew now that her trials were not finished. They had only just begun. Later that night, unable to rest, she walked quietly down the silent corridors. That was when she overheard two voices hidden in the shadows. They spoke of plans, of betrayal, of destroying the Legion from within. She recognized the voices. They belonged to recruits she had trained beside, warriors praised for their strength. She froze, fear racing through her veins. Her instinct told her to run, to stay silent. But her heart reminded her of the trials, of the oath she had spoken. I will not abandon them. This was her chance to prove it again. Quietly, she followed the traitors, careful not to be seen. They moved toward the control chamber, carrying strange devices. She rushed to the commander's quarters. Her voice shook as she spoke. I heard them. They are planning something. Please, you must believe me. The commander studied her in silence, his eyes hidden beneath his helmet. For a moment, she feared he would dismiss her as weak. But then he nodded. Show me. Together they followed her path, and when the traitors were caught, their plan was revealed. They had been sending messages to the enemies of the Legion, hoping to destroy it from within. The chamber filled with shock and anger. Soldiers growled behind their helmets. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade. The commander turned to her in front of them all, his voice loud, clear, unshakable. You saw what others did not. You chose loyalty over fear. That is why you were chosen. The recruits fell silent. The truth was heavy, undeniable. She, the one they had mocked, was the one who had saved them. That night, as she sat in her quarters, the weight of what she had done sank in. She was no longer just a girl from a quiet village. She had uncovered a secret that could have destroyed the Legion. She had proven herself not through strength of arm, but through strength of heart. Still, questions haunted her. Why had the Legion trusted her with this? Why had they seen in her what she could not see in herself? The commander's words echoed in her mind. The Legion does not choose without reason, and somewhere deep inside the ship, in Plath, as she was not allowed to go, more secrets waited. Secrets about her, about why the Legion had come for her at all. The truth was close, but she was not ready for it. Not yet. The Legion had been saved for now, but she could feel it. A greater storm was coming, and she was at the center of it. The days after the traitors were revealed felt uneasy. The ship still moved through the stars, but a shadow hung over every corridor. The Legion had survived, yet trust was broken. The recruits whispered more than ever. Some now looked at her with respect, others with envy. A few even glared at her with quiet hatred, but she tried to ignore it. She kept training, kept learning, waiting for whatever would come next. It came sooner than anyone expected. One night the stars outside the ship flared with sudden light. Explosions shook the metal walls. Soldiers shouted and alarms screamed through the halls. She stumbled from her quarters, her heart racing. "What's happening?" she cried. But she already knew. An enemy fleet had found them. The commander's voice thundered over the intercom. All stations prepare for battle. This is no drill. The ground trembled as the ship's great cannons roared to life. Fighters launched into the void like swarms of fireflies. But the enemy was stronger, faster, and filled with rage. They wanted the Legion destroyed, and they wanted her captured. She ran with the recruits to the armory. Weapons were thrust into their hands. Her fingers shook as she gripped the cold steel. She had trained for this moment, yet fear gnawed at her stomach. Would she be enough? Could she stand where so many had fallen? The battle came quickly. Enemy soldiers stormed the halls, their armor black and marked with crimson. The clash of steel filled the air. Screams echoed down the corridors. She fought alongside the recruits, her strikes clumsy but desperate. Again and again she rose, refusing to fall. Her body ached, but her will burned brighter with each passing moment. In the chaos, she saw something no one else did. A squad of enemy soldiers, slipping toward the engine core, carrying explosives. If the engines fell, the Legion would be trapped and destroyed. Without thinking, she shouted, "This way! Follow me!" Some hesitated, others obeyed. Together they charged into the narrow corridors. The fight was brutal, the enemy was stronger, but she refused to back down. When one of her comrades was about to fall, she threw herself into the strike, taking the blow on her arm. Pain seared through her, but she held on. Her loyalty drove her forward, not just to fight but to protect. At last the enemy squad was defeated, the explosives disarmed, the engines safe. Her group stood battered but alive. Soldiers who once doubted her now looked at her with awe. "She saved us," one whispered. The words spread like fire, but the battle was not over. The enemy pressed harder, filling the ship with blood and fire. The commander himself joined the fight, his blade cutting through enemies with precision, yet even he seemed strained. The Legion was strong, but the traitors' betrayal had weakened them. In the final hour of the battle, the enemy leader appeared, taller and darker than the rest. His voice echoed like thunder. "Give her to me. She is mine by right." The commander stepped forward. "She belongs to the Legion." The duel that followed shook the chamber. Sparks flew as steel met steel, but the enemy was cunning. He struck the commander down, leaving him bleeding on the ground. Silence fell. All eyes turned to her. Fear filled her, but she stepped forward, lifting her weapon with trembling hands. "You will not take me," she said. Her voice was steady. Her heart pounded. The enemy laughed, but she stood her ground. The fight seemed impossible. She was weaker, slower, but she refused to give in. Every strike she blocked, every step she took forward, carried more than her own strength. It carried the loyalty of the Legion, the hope of those who still believed. At the final moment, when the enemy raised his blade to strike her down, the soldiers of the Legion rallied behind her. The smoke from the battle still drifted through the halls of the great ship. The metal floors were scorched, walls broken, and the cries of the wounded echoed softly in the silence. The victory was theirs, yet it did not feel like triumph. It felt like survival. The Legion had stood, but at a heavy cost. She walked slowly among the soldiers, her arm wrapped in bandages. Her steps were heavy, but her heart was steady. Everywhere she looked, eyes followed her. Some were filled with respect, others with wonder. Many still struggled to understand how one girl, once so ordinary, had stood against the storm and changed everything. The commander lay in the med bay, his wounds deep but not fatal. When she entered, he raised his head with effort. His voice was weaker than before, but still carried power. "You have done what even I could not. You turned the Legion back from the edge of defeat." She shook her head. "I am not a hero. I only did what I had to do." But the commander's gaze was firm. "That is what makes you one." The news spread quickly. Across the ship, whispers grew into something greater. Soldiers who once doubted her now spoke her name with pride. They remembered how she had saved the engines, how she had stood against the enemy leader, how she had refused to abandon them. Loyalty had been tested, and she had proven herself true. The Legion gathered in the Great Hall, a place filled with banners of battles long past. Thousands of armored warriors stood in silence, waiting. She stepped forward, unsure, her heart pounding. But when she looked at them, she saw not faceless soldiers but comrades, brothers and sisters who had bled beside her. The oldest of the commanders raised his voice. "The Legion has always chosen leaders of strength, but today we see a truth we have forgotten. True strength is not the sword, but the heart that guides it. This is why the Lion chose her." His words echoed across the chamber, and one by one, the soldiers lowered to their knees. The sound of metal striking the floor was like thunder. She stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. Never had she imagined this. Never had she dreamed that such warriors would kneel before her. But in that moment, she understood this was not about her past, not about who she had been. It was about who she had become and who she would be for them. Yet even in victory, shadows remained. The traitors had been defeated, but whispers of greater enemies still lingered. The battle they had fought was only a spark compared to the storm waiting in the stars. She felt it deep inside. Destiny was not finished with her. The path ahead was longer, darker, filled with choices that would shape not only the Legion, but the galaxy itself. That night she stood at the viewing deck, staring out at the endless stars. They no longer seemed distant. They seemed alive, waiting for her. Her reflection in the glass looked different now, not the face of an ordinary village girl, but the face of someone carrying the weight of countless lives. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I will not fail you," she whispered to the stars. Behind her, the sound of footsteps approached. It was the commander, walking slowly, his wounds still healing. He stood beside her, his eyes on the same horizon. "This is only the beginning," he said, and she knew he was right. The Legion had chosen her not only for who she was, but for who she would become. A leader shaped not by fear, but by loyalty, not by destiny alone, but by the choices she would make. As the ship sailed deeper into the unknown, the warriors around her rose with new strength. Their loyalty no longer belonged to the Legion alone, it belonged to her. And with that, a new chapter began, one that would echo across the stars for generations to come. For in the end, the galaxy did not remember her as the girl who was chosen. It remembered her as the woman who proved why